Brooks from World Transplant Athletes. If you have a body with a new part, you are a World Transplant Athlete. You can follow us at World Transplant Athletes on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and your social media choice. We have a total of 18 organ recipient athletes from 11 countries and 6 languages working behind the scenes to make content for you. Today, we're doing a podcast called Friends of World Transplant Athletes to celebrate and support groups anywhere and everywhere that are either led by organ transplant recipients or have recipients as their primary focus. Today, we are super excited to be talking with Jonathan Traylor of Hope with Jonathan from the United States, who has had a kidney transplant. So, Jonathan, before I intro you a little bit more, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Zach. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, so Jonathan, I get to sort of promote him today. He's got a fantastic show. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out at some point. He does a lot of really cool things, but I'll just give you a little intro, a little sampling of the really cool things that Jonathan does with his show called Hope with Jonathan. So his podcast spotlights chronic kidney disease and chronic illness patients who are currently battling survived kidney disease, transplantation, or something else. Jonathan feels very strongly that by sharing stories, you create not only awareness, but positive outlooks and support for others that experience the same condition. And Jonathan is absolutely right. I mean, every piece of evidence that's out there shows that if you have a stronger sense of community, it can just be friends you make online. It could be a faith-based community. It can be, friends from softball or basketball or anything that you do in life really helps you get through anything you're going through in life much better. In our case, things having to do with transplantation and more specifically kidney disease and so forth. So Jonathan, let's get right to it. So I've said your name a gazillion times, but what's your name, where you're from, and which transplant have you had?
My name is Jonathan Traylor. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. So if you're not from Louisville, it's a lot of people say Louisville, Louisville. If you're from Louisville, it's Louisville. So I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, home of the Louisville Slugger and the Kentucky Derby.
Okay.
But I now live down in the San Antonio, Texas area. It's kind of a
Okay.
long story how I migrated here, but let's just say that a lot of my family migrated here over the years, and that led to a decision later on for me to move down here in the San Antonio area.
Well, what was
Um,
the motivation? I mean, you can talk about that a little bit. What was the motivation to get the family down to that part of the world?
well, my grandparents retired down here, and they were a strong force in my life early on. Had a lot of a time, and I was really close with my grandparents. They had put a lot of effort into being involved in my life and being a positive force in my life. So when they moved away, it was definitely tough, and so we just kept coming down here and visiting like over the course of like 20 years. And so eventually we made a decision to move down here. So the schools are really good down here, and the community that we're in is a great community. And we wanted to move down here and be close to them. And then also my mom had came down here as well, so she kind of followed her mother, which is my grandmother and my grandfather. That she followed them down here, and so of course, when you've got someone like your grandparents and then your mom moves down to Texas, who were huge factors in your life, you want to be close to them. So we definitely, me and my wife, we talked about it. We conversed a lot about it. We came down and visited a lot, and ultimately made the decision to move down here. And it was a positive one for us, for sure.
So you moved from Louisville. How did
Hmm.
you say it again?
Louisville.
Louisville. That's it.
Yes, sir.
Louisville, down
Yes,
to
sir.
San Antonio, Texas. So tell us about your transplant story a little bit. I mean, you've had a kidney transplant. I know that much, and I
Yes, sir.
follow you enough, so I've certainly seen some of your photos and so forth. But I have to admit, I don't know your wider story. So maybe you can kind of share a little bit of your story, Jonathan, how you eventually were able to get a kidney transplant.
Sure. I think maybe a little bit of my backstory. My backstory is pretty long, but I'll give you the short end of it, and that may help about my transplant story. But so in 2019, I began to experience a lot of symptoms, uh, swollen ankles, legs, nauseated, chronic fatigue. These are all symptoms that I realize now after being educated on kidney disease that it was kidney disease. And I was really in bad shape. My potassium had really gotten out of control. And let me state this: prior to all this, I hadn't really went to the doctors like I should have, and I was ignoring a lot of things in my life at the time. And but ultimately, I was kind of a big, strong guy, and always able to lift and do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And but this lifestyle of avoiding doctors and eating what I wanted and things like that, and not really having an exercise routine that was really needed in my life, ultimately landed me in the emergency room with kidney failure. And I was a stage 5 ESRD. They first said it was AKI, but then after my kidneys didn't come back from the first dialysis treatment, they knew it was end stage 5 ESRD. So they I was rushed to my local hospital here, and they did blood work, and they came back and said, your kidneys are failed. We've got to get you, to another city, to San Antonio, that actually has the dialysis machines that you need to save your life. I had never ridden in a helicopter before, Zach, and this was my first ride in a
Bucket
helicopter.
list.
Yeah, San Antonio is about an hour drive for me, and I got there in about 15-20 minutes in a helicopter. As soon as I hit the doors, I crashed, and I blacked out. And
Wow.
they had to shock me and all that. This is all information coming back from the family, my wife and kids, that they told me all this later. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU, hooked to a rather large dialysis machine,
Hmm.
and they wasn't sure I was going to make it, but uh, thanks be to God, I ended up making it and survived that. And after about a 2 week stay, I went into in center dialysis at a local DaVita here in the town that I live in. And I did that 3 days a week. I was on the TTS, which is Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. I did that for around 9 months. And then after around 9 months, I switched over to home hemodialysis.
Hmm.
Zach, I had asked a lot of questions. I had obtained a lot of knowledge, and they felt like that I would be a great candidate. I had gotten to a point where I was kind of telling them how to run me on the machine in center. So they said, you know what, time for him to possibly go to home dialysis. So my wife joined me as a care partner, and
and
she began
she began.
to give me dialysis at home. After about 3 months later of doing home dialysis, after we learned the whole all that information, and it's a lot to do home dialysis.
Yeah.
We got the call for transplant. Now, unfortunately, the person that was my donor, I actually knew him. I actually grew up with him in Kentucky, and he was a friend of the family. We went to events together. We attended church together. Our families knew each other for many years, and unfortunately, he passed away at the young age of 40.
Wow.
And his sister literally called the house, and I ignored her phone call because I didn't know what she really wanted. I thought a lot of people call me for tech advice, and we were heading out the door, and there was some sort of event that was going on, Zach, that I just felt like I needed to ignore that phone call.
Hmm.
And my wife got a phone call and said, hey, he really needs to pick up the phone. And so I pick up the phone and dial her back, and she's telling me on the other end, my brother's passing away, and this is crucial. We would like to donate on his behalf his kidney. So
What's
uh,
his name?
his name was Scott,
Scott. Wow.
and
Thank you,
yes,
Scott.
sir. Yeah. And because he had signed the back of his driver's license, and became a donor, then Kentucky Organ Donation Association, CODA is the name of them. They they flighted that kidney from Louisville, Kentucky, all the way to San Antonio.
Wow.
And so I am a statistic for direct donation, and they direct donated me that kidney 2 years ago. So August the 11th of 2020, I received my kidney transplant,
Yeah.
and it was it's been an incredible journey since then, but and an incredible journey to get there. But my time on dialysis was short, and a lot of people don't share that same story. So I decided that because of that, and because I was so blessed, that we would take my kidney page, which was Hope for Jonathan, and turn it into Hope with Jonathan. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that in a second. But yeah, thanks for sharing this. I've heard some of this before, but I think one of the reasons that we're fans of your show and your story is you're really transparent about some of the things that led up to the moments that you realized that your kidneys were failing. You weren't taking care of yourself. You weren't looking after some things maybe you could have. But even if you were, maybe you were just ignoring some of the clues that could have counted. But I think you're not an outlier. A lot of folks, and kidney disease is a very strange thing. It presents in different ways where you think, well, I'm just a little bit tired. Maybe I'm working nights. That was my case. Or there's a lot of reasons why it's easy to ignore kidney disease. And I think, your transparency and openness is really important for someone listening who maybe can, tune into a clue that they wouldn't have otherwise and maybe get checked out earlier to get a better treatment option for them and their families later on. So that's one kind of thing that stood out. I really liked about your story. And the other thing that I think it's really important who's out there who's listening, have never been exposed to this before. Maybe you're on dialysis, or maybe you have a family member who's kind of getting ready for that, is the importance of being an advocate. So it sounds like Jonathan's case, like he became an expert of his own healthcare in the dialysis center. And so good, they eventually kicked him out and said, you can do this at home. But I think for anyone out there, it's so important to have faith in your own abilities to learn, in your own sense of instinct of how important it is to take care of yourself in any healthcare situation. So I think Jonathan learned that so well. So thanks for sharing those so much. And of course, big thanks to Scott. I mean, what an incredible figure in your life to be ready to donate at that incredible moment in his life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a huge factor. I mean, it's totally changed my life. I mean, after I left in center, Zach, and got on home hemo, I felt great on home hemo. I
Hmm.
was getting more treatments. One of the huge factors for me to transfer to home hemo was I felt sort of institutionalized into dialysis. They had picked my time, my chair time, and I felt like my weekends were gone, and I was having every Saturday I was in there, and after I had the ability to transform over to and switch to home hemo, man, that was amazing. But and I had a lot of strength that came back. Like I said, I was getting more treatments, and I looked great, and but it still wasn't a kidney, and so as you know, your kidneys work 24/7. So I needed that kidney, and that was the next step. And once I got the kidney, I mean, here I am now. I mean, Zach, I'm back working. I'm doing things that I never thought I was going to do again, sitting in a dialysis chair. I mean, when you're sitting in that chair, you start having thoughts, and just a lot of time. You have a lot of time on your hands, right? I mean, you're sitting in that chair for a long time, depending upon your modality, but it's definitely it can be draining, mentally draining. And during my time in chair, I used to think about getting a kidney transplant, but prior to all this, I didn't have any education on any of this stuff.
Hmm.
I had so many different factors and symptoms from years ago that should have been looked at. I was having UTIs. as a man, and those are sort of uncommon for men to get. A lot of UTIs. I was getting them pretty commonly, on the regular. And still nobody was mentioning kidney disease or any
Mhm.
of this stuff, and it just seemed like I was sort of slipping through the cracks with, and a lack of education. Whenever I woke up on a dialysis machine, I mean, I had to get completely educated on dialysis. And then, here they came in the room and started talking to me immediately
Yeah.
about the renal diet and things like that. And I mean, it was literally like a truck, like kidney disease was a Mack truck and just crashed into me.
Yeah, Mack truck of learning, right? A bunch of
Yes.
stuff you have to learn when you're at your weakest point, and you find some strength you didn't know you had. So maybe you
Yes,
can
sir.
talk a little bit about hope for Jonathan and then hope with Jonathan, because like I said at the outset, we really wanted to, as friends of World Transplant Athletes, really wanted to celebrate you and the organization that you're developing and the good work that you're doing in the worldwide community at this point.
Sure, absolutely. So my Facebook page, I had for my own kidney journey or kidney search, donor search, was called Hope for Jonathan. After I got my kidney, I realized that there was so much more that needed to be done, and I had been interviewed on other shows and other podcasts to, help find a kidney donor, and I realized that, I thought, well, you know what, maybe I could do that as well. And so we turned Hope for Jonathan into Hope with Jonathan. And our message is really simple. We want to share your story, and we feel like that, by sharing your story, that you're sharing hope with other patients. And we've tried to bring on a lot of other patients who have had successful, kidney transplant, or maybe they've been a living kidney donor and things like that, so that they will inspire other patients. Because I noticed in center, a lot of people are, they're gloom and doom, and they have a lot of low emotion. They're depressed, they're facing a lot of anxiety, and they need uplifting stories to see that, you can make it. And kidney disease, if if you manage it well, you can continue life and do other things. And there's even, there's life after transplant. Me and you, Zach, are witnesses of that, testimonies of that. And so I think it's important that we share stories like this to help encourage others to want to continue to fight, and want to continue to, strive to get that kidney transplant, do well, in center, and be engaged with their medical team, and know their medications, and try to take care of yourself the best you can. Get on that transplant list so that you can, be transplanted, if that's your wish. Some people don't wish to have a kidney transplant, and that's okay too.
Mhm.
That's their choice. But in my case, I can only tell my story. A kidney transplant has been a huge blessing for me.
Yeah. And you kind of share this a little bit, but the second thing I wanted to ask about you and the organization is what the main message is. I mean, obviously, there's a component of sharing the stories, but if you had to distill your main message into one sentence, what do you think that would be?
Main message is we want to share stories of hope, and that can be anything. That literally, I mean, with kidney disease, it's a great way for us to, share stories that of people who've overcome kidney disease and things like that. But we're also going to be branching into some other diseases and things like that. So we want to branch our show out, but the main message is sharing a message of hope, for other patients to see other people, achieving greatness and overcoming kidney disease, and that there's life after kidney disease.
Yeah, and you kind of are anticipating my next question. I don't know if you saw these ahead of time or not, but um, what I've witnessed over the last year and a half or so of following your show is that you have branched out. So you're not just talking to patients at this point. It seems like you've talked to some renal dietitians and nurses and doctors and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about some of the programming you're doing besides just talking to the patients?
Yeah, we've made a lot of friends along the way, like you, Zach. So we've branched out. We feel like education is huge. Like I said before, I got diagnosed with and crashed into dialysis, near death experience. And I had no education on it at all. And I feel like education is key, and that it's huge. It's a huge factor. So we reached out to like some dietitians and nurses and some doctors. We want to really branch out into that area of education. Like I said, I think it's a huge factor that a lot of people, and there's a lot of stories like mine that people end up on dialysis with kidney failure, and then they say, you know what, I didn't have very much education.
Yeah.
I didn't see much out there on it. So we feel like the education's a huge factor. So
Yeah,
that's the
that's
reason why.
yeah, well, we get that. That's one of our core findings, is how much we as patients on the other side of things can help current patients or people even in the future who are not yet patients experience than what you and I had. And if we can do that, collectively and individually, um, I feel then we're all hugely successful. If one person gets a better outcome in whatever way, emotional, physical, had or I had, then gosh, I feel like this conversation today and all the many things we're doing on a daily basis are definitely worth it. So we definitely are very aligned when it comes to that mission. So just one more question, Jonathan, before we let you go here is how can people engage with you further? You got, we can certainly put this on the post itself, but if you want to say how they can engage with you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we feel like social media is a huge plug and a huge way to engage with others, also to spread our message. And so you can check us out at hopewithjonathan.com. That pretty much is where our, all of our social media pages are, things like that. So you can check us out, hopewithjonathan.com. We also, we're on the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we have LinkedIn. We're also on YouTube. YouTube is, a huge platform for us. We're recently having some pretty good success on TikTok, so have a pretty decent following over there, TikTok. We feel like social media is a huge way to get the message out there. So right now, though, our main source is YouTube. That's where we're promoting our videos and where we're placing them. And so you can find us at Hope with Jonathan over there across the board. So just look for Hope with Jonathan, and there I am.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. So, yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation, more than I ever would have hoped for. So, anyone out there, if you have a body with a new part, you are a world transplant athlete. Tune in to many other programs like Jonathan. We have a slightly different focus, but we have the same mission as helping a recipient either before his or her transplant or certainly after, given the experiences we have and some of the knowledge we can share at this point. So, Jonathan, once again, thanks for taking some time and talking to us today.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity, Zach. And I want to say that you're doing great things as well. So a huge applaud to you. And thanks again
Thanks for
for the
being here.
opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye bye.